Part 109. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1083. Mu Yangling looked down condescendingly, and said to the little bear, forcing them into the dense forest, "We set up so many traps in advance, we can't waste it." Cubs agree. There were too many casualties if they stayed on the road. Xiao Xiang organized the soldiers with better archery skills, lined up in 2 rows, and forced them into the woods in sections. When they have almost entered, you should detour down the mountain on the right side and join the people in front, Mu Yangling told him earnestly. Remember, the most important thing is to preserve your strength, and don't love to fight. Cubs agree. Mu Yangling led another group of people down the mountain into the forest to fight in the jungle. They approached the forest because the trees were dense and it was easy for them to hide. Even if they were far more numerous than themselves, they were not afraid. The trees are dense, so they can't correspond head to tail, and they can't even be sure if they are around them. Before coming here, Mu Yangling had already thought about how to fight this battle. She was best at fighting in the jungle, so naturally she had to use her best fighting style. The trees in the forest are dense, and people cannot be seen clearly from 10 steps away. If you turn around, you may bump into the tree. It is the most convenient for them to hide their tracks and kill them one by one. Mu Yangling divided his soldiers into groups of 5, 3 groups and 1 team, and moved forward in unison, saying, "After an hour, no matter where you are, you must find a way to get to the assembly point. Wait at the spot for 2/4 of an hour, and those who fail to arrive within 2/4 of an hour will be deemed killed in battle." The soldiers responded in a low voice, and followed Mu Yangling into the mountain quietly. When Shujia led the people to move the boulder away, none of the people surrounded inside survived, and the rest either died or hid in the forest. Shujia's eyes turned red and he said, "Send a signal, point out the direction to the soldiers hiding in the forest, find firewood and light the fire." "My lord, I'm afraid lighting a fire will attract the enemy." Shujia gritted his teeth and said, "It would be best if they came. Ambush is not only the opponent can fight, he can too." The lieutenant general could only obey his orders and lead people to light a fire in the open area to point out the direction for the people in the forest. The little bear was lying on the ground, staring at the direction of the fire, eager to try, but remembering his mother's instructions, he could only whisper regretfully to the people around him, "Let's go." Fang Xiaoyi breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Shiza would run over regardless of dissuasion. Although the temptation of the fire was great, there was a 50% chance that it was a trap. Shujia couldn't wait for the enemy to invade, and his face became more and more ugly, and when dusk fell, there were only more than 3,000 people who came out of the forest one after another. Thousands of people, but they haven't met the enemy face to face. Some soldiers reported that they encountered Daki soldiers in the forest, and they escaped after a narrow escape. "How many of them do you know?" The soldier shook his head. "As soon as I entered the mountain, I got separated, and with the cover of trees, I couldn't see how many people there were on the other side. Only 3 people I saw. However, everyone saw that there were 3, 4, or 5 people, so there were nearly 20,000 people in total." The lieutenant general hurriedly said, "My lord, it is impossible for the other party to have so many people, otherwise they would not force us into the dense forest. There must be fewer people than us. I would know it naturally, but now we have lost nearly 6,000 people. Do you think they will be less than us?" The lieutenant was silent. Shujia frowned and said, "I seem to have seen such a tactic, at least someone told me about it, but I don't remember it exactly. General, do we want to go back to Zhengzhou?" "No, it will take 3 days to go to Zhengzhou, but it only takes less than 2 days to go to Henan Mansion. Tell people to take a rest and leave for Henan Mansion immediately tomorrow morning." "Let's go another way." Shujia always felt uneasy. "How do they know that we will go to support Henan province?" At this time, Mu Yangling sent out 3 scouts, saying, "Don't get too close, just see their marching route clearly." He also ordered Colonel Fang and the others, "Let the soldiers hurry up and rest, there is still a tough battle to be fought tomorrow." "Yes. Mom," Little Bear ran over excitedly, "should we go to ambush in advance?" Mu Yangling shook his head, "We are not familiar with the enemy general, and we don't know if he will change his course. It may be a waste of effort to ambush in advance. It is better to wait for the scouts to report before making a decision." Mu Yangling smiled and said, "I didn't think I'd leave them all behind in the next ambush." At 5 o'clock the next day, Shujia pulled out of the camp and walked for almost an hour. At dawn, there was a sudden cry of killing in the forest, and the Dajin reinforcements entered the ambush circle again. Shujia drew out his sword and shouted, "The enemy army is not many, let's charge out." "Didn't you send scouts to see it in advance? Why did you get ambushed? This is not the time to pursue, let's rush out and talk later." Mu Yangling drew his bow fully and shot the lieutenant next to Shujia under his horse with one arrow. Seeing that the opponent was about to attack, he said, "Send a signal, let the cavalry charge, open a hole for the enemy, and let them rush out." "Princess, why don't you take them down in one fell swoop? They are now homeless dogs. They have 4,000 people. Surrounding them may cause them to die, but it is not good for us. Let them go. There is still a team of ambushes behind us." Fang Xiaoyi was very impressed. The little bear was riding on a horse, and when he saw the signal, he immediately led the cavalry to charge out. The enemy army was already flustered and couldn't stop them in time. The cavalry came in 3 times and came out 3 times. The morale of the already heavy enemy army was even lower. The surgery armor intended to let the soldiers fight back, but suddenly there was a loud cry from the front, someone broke out of the encirclement. So, all the soldiers rushed forward, hoping to break out of the encirclement. This time, less than 2,000 people were able to break through the siege. It was only when Shujia regained his composure and began to count the number of people that he realized that something was wrong. His expression changed drastically, and he shouted, "It's been tricked, there must be an ambush ahead, let's go back." "But General, there are also ambush troops ahead." Shujia's face changed a few times, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Both are dead, brothers, let's charge forward and fight with all our strength, maybe we can break out of the encirclement, are you willing to follow the general and charge out?" The 2,000 remnants burst out with a strong will to survive and shouted loudly, "Wish, wish, wish." Mu Yangling hid behind the tree, put on a bow, and when Shujia raised his hand again, the arrow shot out. Shujia waved his hand and shouted loudly, "Go." Before the word "Fa" was uttered, his eyes widened suddenly, and he fell off his horse. Mu Yangling shot and killed the chief general in front of the 2,000 enemy troops. The morale of the 2,000 soldiers was suddenly drained, and they fled in panic. Mu Yangling stared at the front and ordered, "Kill." It was night, all 3,000 soldiers of Daki put on Dajin's military uniforms and headed for Henan Mansion. 3,000 soldiers and horses traveled day and night, and arrived at the north gate of Henan Prefecture at dusk the next day. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1084. The defenders at the North City Gate were shocked when they saw the scattered thousands of soldiers and horses below, and hurriedly reported to Tu Dan. Tu Dan went up to the tower to have a look, and shouted in Jurchen language, "Who are you?" Mu Yangling looked at Fang Xiaoyi. Fang Xiaoyi replied in the Jurchen language she taught, "We are reinforcements from Zhengzhou, we were ambushed on the way, General Shujia was seriously injured, open the city gate for us quickly, the general needs a doctor." Tu Dan saw that they were wearing the clothes of Dajin soldiers, their horses were also Dajin, and they were speaking Dajin language, so he waved his hand and asked the soldiers to open the city gate without thinking too much. Everyone supported each other, but cleverly covered their faces. Although the Han people and the Jurchens are both of the yellow race, there are still some differences between the two. The city gate opened, and Mu Yangling and Xiao Xiang stood behind Captain Fang with their heads bowed in the clothes of ordinary soldiers. As soon as Tu Dan came down from the tower to meet him, Xiao Xiang flew over with a touch of his toes, and grabbed his neck with 5 claws. Everyone was shocked. Mu Yangling had already drawn the knife and beheaded the lieutenant beside Tu Dan. Mu Yangling sneered and said, "If anyone dares to act recklessly, I will kill your general." Tu Dan blushed, and just as he was about to speak, the little bear grabbed his neck fiercely, and his face suddenly turned blue. Just as everyone was hesitating, Fang Xiaoyi led people to surround them, disarmed them, and within a quarter of an hour, the entire city tower was replaced by their people. Mu Yangling ordered the soldiers to be separated into the city tower, leaving some to guard the north tower, and then led them to the south gate. General Shang was attacking the south gate. Because of the war, the people stayed at home after nightfall. When Mu Yangling led people to the south gate, there was a lot of movement. A patrolling soldier looked over and asked, "What's the matter? What do you want? Where are you going?" The soldier who was asked blinked his eyes, sweating on his forehead. What should he do if he can't understand the golden language? Mu Yangling looked back, lowered his voice and scolded, "Hey, the general doesn't allow us to talk too much. We are going to the south gate, let's go." The inquirer really didn't dare to ask any more questions, and hurriedly retreated to the side, but he was a little panicked. The south gate needed reinforcements, and they still had to hide it from them. Could it be that the city was about to collapse? Because Fang Xiaoyi is tall and looks the most like a Jurchen, he has been pretending to be a lieutenant general and walking in front, but in fact he is also uneasy in his heart. He knows a few golden words, which he has learned temporarily. As long as the other party asks him more, it's revealed. It's really hard for him to guarantee that he will be able to open the city gate. Mu Yangling saw that he was so nervous that his forehead was sweating, so he whispered, "You follow Shiza to open the city gate and put down the suspension bridge. I will deal with them and change clothes with me in front. Let the princess wear the clothes he wore." Xiao Yifang was not sure if he would survive now, or if he could live after seeing the prince, so he stammered, "Prince, concubine, you should go to a humble job. You and your son are going to open the city gate and put down the suspension bridge. You have great strength, the speed must be faster than ours." Mu Yangling thought for a while, "Well, if you don't understand what the other party is saying, just frown at him. We are very fast, as long as we can get to the city gate. Every time the gate of the capital city is opened, it takes 10 people to push it open. Even if the gate of the Henan mansion is worse, it may take 5 or 6 people to slowly push it open. You can take the rest of the soldiers to stop the soldiers guarding the gate." Mu Yangling whispered some instructions to Little Bear, and the south gate also arrived. Although it was late at night, the battle was still going on. Captain Fang took out his pocket watch and said in a low voice, "Ma'am, this should be their last attack today. If we don't hurry up, we will be trapped tonight. We are already in the city, so we won't be able to hide the matter of the North City Gate for long. What they rely on is a fast word." Mu Yangling nodded. There were soldiers running under the city tower, and no one stopped them. People from the south gate of the city kept coming for reinforcements these days, and they were no strangers to it. Mu Yangling immediately led 5 or 6 people to the city gate. When he was about to reach the city gate, someone shouted, "Hey, what are you doing there? Hurry up to the tower to support." Xiao Yifang led more than 2,000 soldiers towards the person who called out, and responded vaguely in golden language. At this time, when she reached the bottom of the city gate, she said to the soldiers guarding the gate, "The general asked us to take over." The other party frowned, "But we only changed shifts for less than an hour, why did you come here to change?" With a smile on his face, Mu Yangling stretched out his hand to pat him on the shoulder, and said, "This is the general who loves you." Before he finished speaking, the hand on his shoulder flashed to the back of his neck like a ghost, and pinched the other party's eyes. Kong shrank, and slowly closed his eyes. Just as he was about to collapse to the ground, he was supported by the little bear, who took a step forward. The two accompanying guards blocked the eyes of others. Mu Yangling walked towards the city gate, and pulled out the huge door bolt at once. Only then did the soldiers who were out of sight realize something was wrong, and just about to shout, Little Bear threw away the man in his hand and drew out the knife. Come! There was an instant chaos under the city gate. There are 3 door bolts in total. The door bolt that usually needs 3 or 4 people to hold down was pulled down by Mu Yangling with one hand, but within 2 breaths of effort, all the door bolts were pulled down, and Mu Yangling opened the city gate forcefully. Fang Xiaoyi just walked up to the shouting soldier at this time, drew out his sword and gave him a blow, and the city gate suddenly became chaotic. The soldiers who were trying to attack the city outside and wanted to use the ladder to climb the city wall saw the city tower slowly opening and saw the scene of scuffling inside. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and then someone inside shouted in unison in Chinese, "Brothers! Come on!" The princess opened the city gate. The soldiers with knives outside rushed in without even thinking about it. When there was the first one, there would be a second one. Everyone rushed in with knives, and General Shang behind couldn't stop him. Mu Yangling threw the helmet away and shouted, "Uninstall!" The Han soldiers threw away their helmets one after another and tore off their clothes. Only then did everyone see Daki's military uniform inside. Although it was too late to take off the clothes completely, they only showed a little, and everyone knew they were their own. General Shang was still a bit erratic until he completely occupied Henan Mansion. He was covered in blood and went to look for Princess Rongjun, but as soon as he arrived at the inn, a guard stopped him and said, "General, the princess is washing up. You can wait below." General Shang wiped the blood off his face and asked, "Why did you come to Henan Mansion?" The guard said, as a matter of course, "The prince asked us to ambush the reinforcements. If the reinforcements are gone, of course we must come to Henan Mansion. Otherwise, let them send a distress letter to Zhengzhou. Aren't we going to lie in ambush on the road all the time?" The princess said that as long as the Henan Mansion is taken down, we will not need it stay on the road. So they attacked the city? How can this make him, who has surrounded the 7 Heaven City, but still can't break through? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1085. Mu Yangling didn't stay in Henan Mansion too much. After handing over the follow-up matters to General Shang, she took her people to Zhengzhou. At this time, Qi Heiran had already recovered 3 counties in a row, and fought against the Zhengzhou defenders. Qi Heiran didn't use the strategy of suspicious soldiers. He only brought 24,000 people, and he made a name for 24,000. The Zhengzhou defender repeatedly confirmed that there were only more than 20,000 people, then he sneered, and personally led people out of the city to meet the enemy. Qi Heiran personally led the army to fight head-on, and sent 2 generals to ambush each with 5,000 people, and let Fei Bai and Rong Le go with them. Fei Bai has been fighting with Qi Heiran in the south and north, his skills are not weak, and the blood he saw is no less than those of the generals. What he lacks is military merit, so Qi Heiran is very relieved. He just asked Rong Le to follow Fei Bai closely. Then he said to Fei Bai, "Rong Le is brother Rong's eldest son, you should take good care of him and don't let him die." Fei Bai complied and returned to the team with Rong Le. Rong Le saw that Fei Bai's face was calm and treated him kindly, so he lowered his voice and asked, "General Shang and General Qin both use tactics of suspicion, why don't we use it? Even if Zhengzhou sent reinforcements, there are still 40,000 people in the city now, nearly twice as many as ours." Fei Bai smiled and said, "You also said that the number of generals is doubled. It has always been more difficult to attack a city than to defend it. It takes almost 3 times the number of people to take down a city. If we have a small number of people, if we climb the ladder, I am afraid that they will not be enough for them. It is shot by arrows, so it is better to draw people out and consume them slowly." Fei Bai said confidently, "Our Lord is best at surprise attacks and frontal battles. Didn't you see that the previous county was recovered in just 5 days? This is true, they attacked the city like a divine aid, except for the time spent on the road, they can conquer a city in almost 1 day, which is unbelievable." Rong Li often heard his father say how hard it is to fight a war, but just judging from the experience of the past few days, it seems that fighting is not as difficult as imagined. Fei Bai has been a servant with Qi Heiran for so many years, Rong Li's expression can't be hidden from him. He sighed in his heart, knowing that he has never experienced it before. He might not believe it if he persuaded the other party. The future battles will only become more and more difficult, let him experience it by himself. Fighting has always been the hardest. Whether it is for soldiers or generals, many things that I once thought I would never be able to adapt to, can be adapted in war. The little bear swallowed the dry food with the water, turned to look at his mother, and saw that she was soaking the dry biscuits in the water, so he moved over and said, "Mom, I'll catch 2 rabbits for you to eat." Mu Yangling glanced at him and said, "Do you know why you have to eat the same dry food as your soldiers?" "I know that only by sharing joys and sorrows with them can the army's morale be united, but mother, I have to share joys and sorrows with them. You are my mother, and you should enjoy happiness." Mu Yangling said with a smile, "You are very sharp-tongued now, did you learn from those veterans?" "No, this is my son's idea." "I thank you for your filial piety," Mu Yangling said. "We eat and live with the soldiers, not only to gather the morale of the army, but also to polish ourselves. Also, we are going to go around to the north of Zhengzhou now to ambush us. For the Jin soldiers who escaped from Zhengzhou, it is naturally best to hide our whereabouts at this time, and lighting a fire may expose our whereabouts, but it has been cold for the past 2 days, we can only lean together to keep warm, dare not light a fire. Mother, when do you think Dad will take down Zhengzhou? We don't have much dry food on us." Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Don't worry, Zhengzhou is the first big city your father will face, and the morale is at its peak, and it won't be long. At this time, the news of the loss of Henan Prefecture should have spread to Zhengzhou city, and they should panic. It's been a while." At this time, Qi Heiran, who had just won a battle during the day, was making people celebrate all night long. The Jin soldiers received the news and attacked overnight. The cavalry rushed into the camp, only to find that there were only 100 or so people in the camp beating drums, yelling. There were a lot of wine jars on the ground. Their complexion changed, they knew they had been fooled, they turned their horses around and were about to leave, but torches were raised all around. Qi Heiran said coldly, "Shoot people instead of horses, shoot them, leave them all." The Jin soldiers had the idea of rushing to the camp, so they only sent 500 cavalry. It should be the idea of rushing up and down the camp and burning food and grass, but they didn't expect that the 500 cavalry were ambushed and surrounded by 20,000 people. Dumplings were made. Qi Heiran asked Fei Bai to change into Golden Man's clothes, and took 400 cavalry to Zhengzhou city. Qi Heiran said, "Come out after a charge, don't love to fight, and also, most of Zhengzhou city is Han, remember to shout a few times, pick them up." Qi Heiran sneered, "Naturally, ordinary people have no guts to confront the Jin soldiers, but there are also many big families in Zhengzhou city, and there are even fallen families in it. Some people turned their backs on their homeland and opened the city gates to the Jin people, and now there must be people who defect to us." Fei Bai became agitated. He knew that the Lord had given him the merits of a general, because the golden soldiers would never have thought that the cavalry who came out to attack would be made dumplings and the ones who went back were fake, Most of them rode the golden soldier's war horses. He was wearing Jinbing's clothes, and when his vision was dim at night, he couldn't tell the difference at all. Fei Bai led his men to Zhengzhou, thinking of how to tell them to open the gate downstairs, but who knew that the people on the tower saw them coming back and asked people to open the gate of the small city. That's right, they were going out to attack. How could they have time to chat outside? Naturally it was better to enter the city as soon as possible, so as not to be caught up by the pursuers. Fei Bai led his men into the city tower, drew his sword and started killing them as soon as they entered, so that they had no chance to close the city gate. Fei Bai rushed into one street with his men, shouted a few words and then rushed out with his team. When De Jin's cavalry rushed out, he had already led his men and rushed out of the city again. The Zhengzhou guard looked at the chaotic and howling soldiers, and felt chills all over his body, one step after another, as if he had calculated it. A messenger rushed over, kneeling and worshipping covered in blood. "General, the Henan mansion has fallen." The face of the Zhengzhou guard changed, and a general came quickly with a letter from the flying pigeon, and said in a low voice, "General, just received the letter from the Kaifeng mansion. The Kaifeng mansion fell at noon today, and the defeated army is heading towards us. Come." The Zhengzhou guard tightened his grip on the letter, and said, "Send a letter to the imperial court immediately, asking for reinforcements." However, the Dajin court was in chaos. They didn't expect Daki to move so fast, and it was only in late February that they attacked together. The papers asking for soldiers and food from all over the country almost buried the emperor, but when Zhenzhu's request for help arrived before the emperor's case, Zhengzhou fell, and the defender of Zhengzhou lived and died with Zhengzhou. Encountered an ambush on the way, killed in battle, 4,500 of the defeated army died, and 3,500 were captured. The Reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1086. Qi Heiran captured Zhengzhou. Emperor Luanjia also arrived at the front line. Qi Ziyuan personally deployed, and led the troops from all walks of life to speed up the process. Before Wuli and Wo Kuo had negotiated terms, Daki's army launched a massive attack at this time, and Dajin fell into a predicament of attacking both front and back. He could only squeeze out soldiers from all over the country for reinforcements, and at the same time speed up the harvesting of the people to raise food and grass. This method of drinking poison to quench thirst soon forced more people to join the ranks of rebellion, and the Han people in the south of Datong Mansion knew that Daki was going to. When the call came, one after another raised the flag of righteousness to respond to the Daki army. The Han people lived very badly under the rule of Dajin. Taxes were nearly twice as heavy as before, and all kinds of exorbitant donations abounded, which almost gave them no chance to breathe. Moreover, in Dajin, Jin people can humiliate and kill Han people at will, and afterward, they can only pay some money or pay a few boards. It can be said that in Dajin, Han people are worse than a horse. Dajin is in dire straits, and Wo Kuo's life is gradually becoming difficult. First, his subordinates withheld property and withheld military pay, and then several of his brothers came to fight him for power. Although he and Emperor Dajin Wulai privately agreed to temporarily cease fighting against the Han people, but after all, the two sides have been fighting for several years, and both relatives and brothers died at the hands of the other side, so the conflicts between the two sides have continued, and who knows who spread the rumor that he wants to accept Dajin's offer of security. You must use the soldiers of the three armed forces to surrender, in order to seek prosperity and wealth. This is simply slander. His purpose is to become the emperor and surrender. If he really wanted to surrender, he would have voted long ago. Why wait until now? But no one seems to be willing to listen to his explanation, and his think tank has no good solution. The military division was even accidentally injured in the conflict with the Jinren, which not only angered the soldiers below, but also made him lose an idea. People. But just when he was about to send troops to stop the Han people, Zixia took advantage of the fire and took down two of their cities in a row. It took him so many years to conquer half of the country, how could he let Zixia take it away? Therefore, Wokuo was too busy to touch the ground for a while. He had to subdue his brother, deal with the relationship with Dajin, arrange a counter-attack against Zixia, and finally send people to the south to stop the Han people. Under such circumstances, Wokuo's control over his subordinates was inevitably somewhat negligent. Before he knew it, Li Zhang slowly divided the relationship between him and his subordinates. Since you dare to betray the alliance, you must be prepared to pay the price for it. De Jin's army had been in civil war for several years, and the soldiers were exhausted, and their morale was already low. At this time, De Qi's army was advancing at the same time, and the opponent kept getting good news, but they were retreating steadily, and their morale had already dropped to freezing point. And behind them there was an uprising peasant army. They tried their best to defend the city, but the people they thought they were protecting risked their lives to approach the city gate under the pretext of helping to defend the city, and opened the city gate for the Daqi army outside. The common people of Jin informed the Han army to encircle and suppress them. This feeling of being enemies on all sides made the soldiers almost collapse, and they couldn't stop the Daqi army whose morale was getting higher and higher. General Dajin slapped the table angrily, advocating that all the Han people under his rule should be massacred to avoid future troubles. I didn't know they were also my Dajin people. Wu Lai's face was also ugly. He also felt that these Han people were too tricky to be ungrateful, but he couldn't agree to massacre Han people for no reason. How many Han people are there in the south of Datong Mansion? At least 7 of the 10 people are Han Chinese, all slaughtered, their blades can be rolled up, and they will also drive all the remaining Han people back, and the north of Tokyo has long been occupied by Wokuo, and they will lose the south of Datong. Dakin really died. Wu Lai didn't want to be the king of subjugation, he had only been the emperor for 10 years, and he hadn't had time to do anything yet. At this time, the remarks of the main peace faction were noticed by him. The peace faction is different from the war faction, they are more moderate. The main peace faction advocates first reducing or exempting the people's taxes, reducing domestic conflicts, trying to contain the momentum of domestic rebellion, and then sending people to seek peace with De Qi to delay the time as much as possible. Let people bring gold and silver to Zixia to lobby, hoping that the other party can send troops to Daqi to contain the opponent's strength. If Daqi agrees to make peace, they are willing to give away the occupied land, even if they pay tribute every year, as long as they stop first. Only when they go to war will they have a chance to integrate their forces and come back again. Otherwise, if De Qi is destroyed, De Jin will really die. Wu Lai agreed after thinking about it, and sent envoys to meet the emperors of Zixia and Daqi respectively. After Qi Ziyuan received De Jin's letter of credence, he laughed with General Yuan who came to see him. I was worried that I didn't have time to gather forces, so they sent me an excuse. General Yuan was worried, the emperor wants to agree to peace talks. I don't agree, Qi Ziyuan said with a smile, drag them first. The general took the opportunity to let the soldiers rest and move up the food and grass first, and then we will talk about it. Moreover, the places that have been shot down must be guarded. It is not enough to shoot down the city. The local magistrate, the magistrate they have to be reassigned, and various systems have to be changed. There are many things like this, and I didn't expect that we would be able to regain Jinan Prefecture so quickly, so we should take it easy. Because the fight was very fast, the supply of food and grass in the follow-up was somewhat insufficient, and if we continued to charge forward, I was afraid that there would be deep danger, and there would be many problems. Qi Ziyuan has always been calm. Since further advances are not good for them, it is better to stop and settle down. Qi Ziyuan looked at the white-haired and bearded General Yuan, sighed, patted his hand and said, I know the old general is anxious, but at this moment, it is better to be anxious. Didn't keep it, why? General Yuan's eyes were red, he bowed his head deeply, and said, in addition to the reasons of the previous court, There is also the fact that the last general advanced too quickly and his power was not stable enough, so naturally he couldn't stand the city, and the army went deep alone without any response. Army. Chi Xiuyuan nodded. It's for this reason that General and General Mu both stopped and reorganized the army. Chi Xiuyuan smiled and said, the general found out that since I came here in person, it is impossible to give up halfway. Peace talks? Humph. Unless they return all the lost land, otherwise how can we talk about peace? General Yuan heaved a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that today, like Emperor Jinjian of the previous dynasty, he would agree to peace talks with Jin, and then all the results of their 2-month hard work would be in vain. Qi Xiuyuan asked General Yuan and Mu Shi to rest and reorganize the army, but gave Qi Heiran an order to go forward in one go, just take down the city, and he will send people to finish it later, and the food and grass for him will definitely be supplied. Seeing that Qi Heiran had fought all the way to the Daming Mansion, General Yuan was even more relieved when he saw that Qi Heiran had fought all the way to the Daming Mansion, and then seeing Zhou, Shijiazhuang and other places. It seems that he is really focused on regaining the country now. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1087. Qi Heiran sat down next to Mu Yangling, and quickly picked out a potato from the fire. Seeing that he was so hot that he shook his hand and wanted to peel it, Mu Yangling put the freshly peeled potato in her hand and stuffed it into his hand. Taking it from his hand, he said, "Eat this first." Qi Heiran stuffed it into his mouth, and said with a cold breath, "This cold spring looks colder than winter. Fortunately, we captured a lot of winter clothes from the golden soldiers, otherwise the soldiers would have frostbite. It's a pity that there is not much food and grass seized." Mu Yangling gnawed on the potatoes regretfully. Qi Heiran felt a little distressed when he saw it. He held her hand and said, "Wait until the next place, master will take you to a restaurant." Mu Yangling smiled, and replied happily, "Okay, then I will have mutton soup with big meat buns, and roast chicken." Qi Heiran suddenly felt drooling, and nodded repeatedly, "Eat them all." The little bear who came over with a dry steamed bun suddenly felt that his mouth was tasteless. He sat down next to his parents a little bit wronged. Qi Heiran slapped him. "Who gave you wronged? Father, when will the food and grass be delivered? We can't keep eating steamed buns and potatoes, right? The soldiers have to fight the enemy. How can we do without oil and water?" Qi Heiran looked to the south and said, "Don't worry, I'm here, and your second uncle will try his best to send food and grass here." Qi Heiran didn't say a truce to let everyone rest. He knew that General Yuan and his father-in-law had already stopped fighting and rested. With the backing of the Daqi court, and with them replenishing his troops and defending the cities he had built, all he needs to do is to keep attacking the city and regaining the lost land. Seeing his son's bitter face, he laughed at him and said, "Is this too bitter? Now we have enough food and grass, but we can't transport it temporarily. Even so, you still have dry food, potatoes and sweet potatoes to satisfy your hunger. Back then, you and I when fighting, don't talk about dry food, you have to eat the horses that died in battle when you were hungry, and even the horses that have not been retired." Qi Heiran's eyes were slightly moist when he said this. "You have your own horse now, you should know, it is equivalent to its own partner. After eating the horse meat, it is time to eat guanyin clay." Little Bear was shocked. "Have you ever eaten guanyin soil?" Mu Yangling glanced at him and said, "Your father even drank horse urine, but only ate guanyin clay, so why make such a fuss?" Little Xiang held the dry steamed bun in his hand, and suddenly dared not say that it was tasteless. Qi Heiran took out a potato, peeled it for his son to eat, took the dry steamed bun in his hand and roasted it on the fire, and said, "Don't look at this as a steamed bun that can kill people, in fact, it's very good if it's done well. Food." Qi Heiran turned it over a few times, and when he saw that the steamed bun was softer, he took it over and cut the steamed bun into slices with a dagger, roasted it until it was browned, mashed the potatoes and sandwiched them in the middle and handed them to his son. "Taste it." It was the first time for the little bear to see his father bake something, and he took it and bit it in surprise. His eyes widened in surprise. "It's delicious, Dad, you are so amazing, even better than your mother." Chi-Heiran said complacently, "Of course, with your mother's skills, you can only roast good things when there is meat and ingredients. If you really want to talk about the ability to make a living outside, it's still up to me." Seeing that he was so proud, Mu Yangling said, "If I go out to make a living, I'll go hunting in the mountains by myself, and I still need to eat dry steamed buns with you. What if you can't catch the prey? The mountains and forests are all here, why can't we hit them?" Chi-Heiran snorted and said, "There are always accidents in this world. You can't just point to one skill and want to eat the world. What if you just can't catch the prey, or you don't have the ability to hunt the prey anymore? You have to learn how to eat grass, bark, leaves, and even dirt." Chi-Heiran raised his chin and signaled Mu Yangling to turn his head to look at the veteran behind him. "Look, they are the most survivable people in the world, and those old beggars and refugees, they know how to do it just by pulling weeds. The best food. How can you fill your stomach, son? If you want to learn to lead the army, follow me. If you want to learn to fight, follow your mother and me, but you must learn how to be comfortable on the road, not hungry, and live. See, no, go deal with them, and you will benefit endlessly." Little Bear turned his head to look at those dirty veterans who were laughing with their legs crossed, and couldn't accept it for a while. He knew that he came to study in the army, but he mostly followed his mother to see how she fought, or followed his father to see how he used soldiers, or followed Fei-Bai on the battlefield to kill the enemy, even if he would fight with him. Most of the soldiers mixed together were dealing with officers above the general banner, or staying with recruits. These old soldiers who often said dirty words and looked like gangsters disliked him very much. Even though he himself doesn't insist that the other party abide by certain things like a dogma, like a nerd, he has received a good education since he was a child. The brothers and sisters just came back to crawl, and their mother taught them to wash their hands after eating, to be polite to others, and to be mischievous, but you are not allowed to swear, let alone insult people, so although he doesn't show it on the face, he looks down on those veterans. Chi-Heiran patted him on the shoulder and said, "Everyone has something to learn from. I asked you to deal with them. I didn't want you to learn their bad habits. Veterans of their age have all passed through the frontier border. Chaos of changing dynasties, some older ones, even experienced the chaos of the former dynasty moving south. They were born in troubled times, lived in troubled times, and being able to live until now is a skill in itself." Little Bear said sadly, "Then, what about those who died? Some of them are heroes who died for their own ideals and sacrificed to defend their home and country, some are villains who died because of their own ambitions, but most of them are ordinary people. They wanted to survive, but the times did not allow them to live." Chi-Heiran looked at those veterans, and said calmly, "They are ordinary people who can survive. They don't have too many ideals or ambitions. They just want to live. In this troubled world, they really use their abilities. Survived, this is their ability, and I let you learn from them. Bear, you have to remember, father and mother do not want you to be a hero. As long as you are alive, only alive, you can do what you want." Seeing his son's wide-eyed look, Mu Yangling couldn't help laughing. "Actually, your father wanted you to start as a soldier from the beginning and learn from those veterans, but I was afraid that you would become rebellious. You are the son of the prince, everyone let you. If you don't want to learn, everyone will definitely accommodate you, which is not beautiful. Your father let me take you, go through the war first, and tell you these things when your blood is almost down. Your father said that your first lesson should be survival. Are you willing to make up this lesson now?" So, the next day, Little Bear was thrown into a group of veterans wearing the padded coats of recruits. These veterans were some distance away from the prince and others. Plus, Little Bear's face was blackened again. His image at this time was very different from his image when he was a prince. Far away, no one would recognize him. The veterans are used to bullying the new recruits, bullying him terribly. Thinking that he wants to learn how to survive from them, Little Seong can only swallow his anger. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1088. Chi Haerin felt distressed and funny when he saw it. He couldn't help but ran into the mountains and caught 2 pheasants to roast. He gave one to his son and secretly gave the other to Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling gave a low laugh, and pulled him into the account. What do you think is that? On the table was a leg of lamb that had been grilled until it was burnt brown. Chi Haerin asked dumbfounded, where did this come from? I caught it. I originally wanted to catch a roe deer. Who knows that I encountered this thing as soon as I entered the mountain. I was lucky. The tent was set up early today, so I asked the kitchen to leave a leg, and the rest of the stew for everyone. It's a tooth sacrifice. But a lamb has been stewed with so much soup that I can't even taste it. Wrap it up when you are done, and then you have to go on your way to make tooth sacrifices for you father and son. Chi Haerin couldn't help pinching Mu Yangling's hand, and said in a low voice, be patient, I guess the food and grass will arrive in a few days, if not, we will go to rob Dajin's food and grass. Dajin doesn't have food and grass for us to rob. All the villages and towns we passed by in the past 2 days have been plundered by Jin soldiers. I think Jinting must not be able to raise food and wages. That's why Jin soldiers are allowed to use this method of drinking poison to quench their thirst. Jinting gang ordered to pay taxes in person and treat the common people kindly. Mu Yangling sighed and said, that's why I said that Dajin's anger is exhausted, the government orders are blocked, and chaos occurs frequently, but the people are suffering. Chi Haerin didn't have Mu Yangling's size, he was very optimistic, and said, we take the city at the front, and someone will come to settle them at the back. The suffering is not going to go anywhere, as long as the golden soldiers don't kill people. From Chi Haerin's point of view, their luck is considered good, and they are catching up with the thick warehouses in Daki, so after the recovery, there will be food relief to help them survive the sluggish March, April, and May, otherwise even if the golden soldiers don't rob them. Several years of war and occasional natural disasters are enough for them. At this time, the people who have recovered the place are indeed very fortunate, and the vitality lost by the robbing by the golden soldiers has gradually recovered. The situation in the restored area quickly spread to the unrecovered places. The people welcomed Daki's army even more, and they all hoped that the next place Daki would recover would be their county town, and they hated the wanton plundering of the Jin people. However, the Han people behind the Jin soldiers rebelled more, and Chi Haerin could receive a group of rebels wherever he went, and with the help of the local people, their progress was indeed very fast. The logistics soldiers carrying food and grass behind them have been chasing them. Fan Zijan counted the schedule, his mouth was bubbling with anxiety. Haerin and the others had been out of food for 3 days, if the food and grass could not keep up with the people, they would starve to death. Fan Zijan was very dissatisfied with the efficiency of the logistics department. The food and grass had always acted before the army. He had prepared the food and grass early on, but the logistics department in charge of delivery could not even catch up with the army that conquered the city. Fan Zijan was angry and hated at them, so he had to go to the emperor. Said, Big cousin, if we can't keep up with food and grass, why not let Haerin and the others wait and let the soldiers fight, they must be fed. Chi Ziyuan clicked on the map and said, you can't stop, General Yuan and General Mu have packed up, and they have already led the army to go, at this time he can't stop, don't worry, as long as he can fight, he won't be hungry, so that's what happened back then. He can't starve to death, and now he can't starve even more. Fanzijan curled his lips, but I always eat dry food, and I can't get enough. Then let your logistics department speed up, the food escorts can't even keep up with the attacking army. Chi Ziyuan sneered, if it wasn't for the war, I really want to kill them. Fanzijan also thought about it, but at this moment, he could not move steadily. Chi Heiran was on the front line, so he didn't dare to make big moves. Fanzijan gritted his teeth and went back to force the logistics soldiers. If he couldn't send the food and grass to the army, he would be dealt with by military law. After being forced like this, the grain and grass finally caught up with the large army 2 days later, and the soldiers escorting the grain and grass almost fell to the ground and vomited blood. The reason why they are slower than the main force is because of the cold spring. They are also unlucky. In previous years, the cold weather in the spring was colder, or there was a little rain, but this year there was hail in the cold spring, and then some light snow. The road was so slippery that they could skate on ice, the donkey carts and carts slipped from time to time, and they had to stop to load the carts as soon as the food fell. Such a toss was actually slower than the army. At this time, when they saw the prince, they knelt on the ground, hoping that the prince could speak well for them in front of the duke. They really didn't mean to delay. Chi Heiran scolded them and drove them out. They had problems, didn't he? If they hadn't been able to intercept some of the enemy's food and grass every time they attacked the city, his army would have starved to death, and his wife and children were all in the army. Because the food and grass were not delivered in time, Mu Yangling lost a lot of weight in the circle. The little bear is so thin that only skin and bones are left. They were innocent, so weren't his soldiers, his wife, and children innocent? Delaying the military situation would have been punished. When the food and grass were delivered, little Xiong felt that he could finally have enough to eat, so he went to cook with his bowl in his arms. Seeing that he had eaten 3 bowls, the veterans wanted to beat him, so they grabbed him and said, "Boy, you eat 2 bowls each. The amount for a person, what will we eat if we eat it?" Each banner received a certain amount of food, he ate more, they had to eat less. Little Xiong was startled, and looked at them pitifully. Could it be that he was still hungry when the food and grass arrived? The veterans snorted twice, wanting to say that they don't want to be coquettish, but seeing the pitiful look of the little bear's mouth, they couldn't help asking, "Boy, I've wanted to ask you for a long time, how old are you this year?" He looks strong, but his face is so tender that he looks like he is not an adult. Little Bear said, "I'll be 13 in July." The veterans frowned. They had to be 16 years old to join the army. Even when there was a shortage of soldiers, the age slowed down. The youngest had to be 14 years old. Xiao Xiong was sent to the army at the age of 12. The veterans of the same Zioki looked at each other and sighed. They have served in the army for more than 20 years. The hearts of the few people were already cold and hard, but at this moment they couldn't help but soften. An old soldier took the bowl in his hand and made him a bowl of rice, saying, "Tomorrow you will go to the kitchen with me to eat. You are still young, I have to make up some things, or I won't grow up in the future." Bear's eyes lit up. Is he being tolerated? Does it mean that he can learn from them in the future? In the evening, little Xiong sneaked into his father's big tent for supper, and happily reported to him, "Daddy, do you think they will teach me how to survive if I directly ask them?" Chi Heiran raised his head and glanced at him, and said, "Didn't they teach you earlier? Otherwise what do you think they ordered you to do these few days?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1089. Little Bear opened his mouth wide. What has he been doing these days? He marches exhaustingly every day. He used to have horses to ride when he was a prince's son, but now he is a little soldier who relies on 2 legs. Because he was a recruit, he was bullied by the veterans. He had to help them carry some luggage when they marched in a hurry, and he had to help them fetch water, dig weeds, collect firewood, light a fire, and help them bake things when they stopped. Sometimes I have to help them grab rations, and I am kicked awake from time to time when I sleep at night. I am so busy. Seeing his son's bewildered look, Chi-Heiran couldn't help sighing. What they asked you to do is to teach you skills. Can you carry a pile of luggage on your back while marching in a hurry, thinking, and looking for something to eat on the way? Little Bear looked weird. That's what I do, I used to. Little Bear thought for a while and said, I used to be able to do this if I wanted to. Dad, why did you let me become a soldier? Chi-Heiran snorted coldly. You only think this is easy to learn? You have great strength, and you also have internal energy to adjust your breath, but in terms of endurance, you are far inferior to those veterans. You think you can do this before, but you miss. Can you keep up with the veterans during the first 3 days of rapid march? Little Bear opened his mouth, looking a little ashamed. Chi-Heiran stood up and said, I'm telling you again, don't underestimate those veterans. Although they can't teach war and other greater skills, on the way to survival, even your father and I sometimes can't compare to them. They asked you to carry their luggage for them, but did they always take the dry food, water, and weapons by themselves? Chi-Heiran sneered. Only those who have joined the army for a few months and have consciously fought on the battlefield. Only veterans bully the newcomers, and give all the things to the recruits. Every time the army stops, they choose places that are easy to defend and difficult to attack. You need to find the water source yourself, but every time you can find the water source quickly. Why? Your mother taught you how to find water sources and edible wild vegetables, but think about it for yourself. Are you using what your mother taught you these days? As a soldier on the expedition, even if you don't watch the night, you can't sleep well. They kick you awake from time to save you. Chi-Heiran said, Son, you still have a lot to learn. Little Bear felt ashamed. He had always had a problem with the veterans who instructed him to work, but he didn't expect that they were teaching him. Chi-Heiran saw his son's expression, and suddenly felt that he was stupid and cute, opened his mouth, and finally held back. Mu Yangling pushed him, and said with a smile, Go back quickly, they will be suspicious if you have been out for too long. These veterans are very smart, and they will go out for a while and roll on the grass. Little Xiong pouted and asked, Mom, is it because I'm not good at learning, so I have to learn from them how to find water and wild vegetables? Silly boy, what I taught you before is to find clear and clean water sources and delicious wild vegetables. The premise is that you have enough time, enough for you to wander around leisurely, but now you are a soldier following the army. You can't leave the camp too far. You have to march in a hurry, and time is tight, so you can only search for it at the nearest place. Look at the water you find along the way. There are rivers, streams, caves, ditches, and even I picked up the hailstones on the ground, both clean and dirty. The situation is different, so what you need to learn is naturally different, not to mention that I used to teach you to find wild vegetables and stew chicken and rabbits. Now they teach you what kind of weeds can be eaten along the way, what parts of the leaves can be eaten, how to eat. Mu Yangling rubbed his head, and said with a smile, The main reason is that we are marching in a hurry now, so I let you learn from them. Wait, when there is a big war, you have to learn how to fight with your father. Little Xiong lowered his head and thought for a while, then said, I understand, Mother, I want to be a general. I have to learn to survive, but I have to learn to use soldiers to fight. Mu Yangling nodded with a smile. Little Xiong left happily, and Chi-Heiran complained, Why is he so stupid? I wasn't so stupid before. He actually thinks that those veterans are teaching him specially. Those veterans kicked him awake to remind him, but it only started 2 days ago, and it was because he was obedient. Other things were indeed instructing the little bear to work. Can think of these things. He threw the bear among these veterans because he knew that they would bully the recruits, and those who were bullied could always learn something deeply. Mu Yangling smiled and said, Let him think so that he can feel more relaxed and feel better. But little Xiong didn't stay with those veterans for long, because within 2 days of the delivery of the military rations, they received a full-scale attack, and they received orders from Shijiazhuang as soon as possible, and little Xiong returned to his parents to learn how to fight with soldiers. Shijiazhuang is followed by Zhending Mansion. As long as Zhending is captured, the gate to the north will be opened. The troops of General Shang and General Qin will slowly gather in Shijiazhuang, and the 3 armies will converge to surround the west gate and south gate of Shijiazhuang. Shijiazhuang only has 50,000 garrison troops, while Qi Heiran's army has increased instead of decreasing, reaching a total of 150,000 troops. At the same time, Qi Ziyuan ordered Mu Shi to start attacking Taiyuan, and ordered General Yuan to divide his troops into 2, one to take Yudu Mansion to the east, and one to take Hejian Mansion to the north. Yes, they were cheated, but gave them time to rest. When the news came back, Wu Lai tore up the secret letter with hatred, and said in a hateful voice, "If I had known this, I should have killed Qi Heiran back then." Wu Lai walked back and forth anxiously, and said to the envoy, "Send someone to look for Wo Kuo, and say that I am willing to cede the city and only ask for the cooperation between the 2 armies. First, keep the Qi soldiers out of Taiyuan. If soldiers capture Taiyuan Zhending, our children in the grassland will never have a peaceful day, and the king of Rongjun in Daki is warlike. Once they regain the lost land, his heart in the grassland will not be far away." The envoy responded. Holding Wuli's letter, Wo Kuo felt very complicated. Some of his men agreed with it, and some opposed it. Li Zhang was one of the people who strongly opposed it. He said angrily, "Khan, the Jin people are so cunning, who knows if this is their strategy to delay the army? You know, before he wanted to negotiate peace with Qi Bing to deal with us, such two-faced people cannot be trusted, not to mention we have a death feud with them. Yeah, King Khan, we can't promise them. What if we cooperate with them and they stab us in the back? But the emperor of the Jin kingdom is also right. Daki's Rongjun king is good at fighting. If he captures the Zhending area, he may go out to attack us in the future. Daki is now strong, with sufficient food and grass. I'm afraid we are not theirs opponents. It's better to take advantage of the fact that they are fighting fiercely now and have no time to take care of them and keep them south of Taiyuan Zhending." Li Zhang persuaded, "The Han people are good at farming and weaving, they don't like grazing, and they are not keen on the grassland. They just want to recover the lost land. Speaking of which, it is Dajin who robbed their land, and it has nothing to do with us. A military advisor is a Han Chinese, so he will naturally speak for the Han people." Although Wo Kuo didn't speak, he had a 3-point approval on his face, because Li Zhang had always shown his friendliness to the Han people. Li Zhang's complexion changed, and he looked at him sadly. "King Khan, we escaped from the mine together. I admit that I am partial to Han people, because I am Han, but I am also your brother. You my friend, back then we could even sacrifice our lives for each other, don't you believe me now?" Wo Kuo's complexion changed, and he hurriedly said, "Of course not, the military advisor should not think too much. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1090. Although Li Zhang is a Han Chinese, he is also Wo Kuo's savior. At the mine, it was Li Zhang who saved his rations, and worked with Xueji to find a way to get medicine to treat his injuries so that he could survive. After the rebellion, Li Zhang also made a lot of contributions as a military advisor. Before their power was established, he tried to talk to De Qi and asked for a lot of weapons. His prestige in the army was not low. If it is rumored that he doubts Li Zhang, it will definitely give people the impression of Liang Gongzhang. His current position is not stable, and he must not lose the morale of the army because of this. But Wo Kuo also has some doubts about Li Zhang. He has always been considerate. How could he say such things at this time and lead people to suspect him? Li Zhang didn't seem to see Wo Kuo's inquisitive gaze. His face was still full of anger. He stood up and said, I know that because I am a Han, you think that I speak to them, but I am also your brother, your military advisor. Even if I face them, choose who do you think I will choose between you and a group of strangers? I don't agree with the fallout with Daki at this time. Everyone was a little moved, and they all looked at each other, looking at Wokuo, and Wokuo was also moved, but he was even more reluctant to part with the large land of Daki. The grassland is poor. Why do they always want to expand south? It is because the land of the Han people is fertile, and the Han people are good at farming and weaving. Only by occupying this land can they have enough wealth. Wokuo didn't agree in the end, but said he would think about it. Li Jiang knew that haste makes waste, and if he continued to speak, he was afraid that it would arouse suspicion, so he just said indifferently, King Khan should make up his mind quickly, and the time is not waiting for me. Wokuo nodded slightly. When Li Jiang went back to his tent, Xueji saw him coming in and asked, how is it? Li Jiang shook his head slightly. Xueji was a little disappointed, and said in a low voice, our relationship with the prince has become more and more difficult. I don't know if Wokuo has become suspicious. The interrogation along the way is very strict. Li Jiang pondered and said, it's not peaceful recently. Zixia and Dajin have taken back 2 places in a row. I'm afraid he also suspects that there are spies among them, not necessarily targeting us, but we still have to be careful recently, don't let him get caught handle. Xueji was still a little sad, the brotherhood of 7 or 8 years. Li Jiang sneered and said, that's what he did first. If he thinks about us brothers, we won't be where we are today. Although the two worked carefully, but when Wokuo concealed his identity, they did not have any purpose when they rescued him. The 2 of them were accidentally caught in the mine. But for the sake of asking the prince for weapons, it was intentional, but they also wanted to stay with Wokuo to serve, so they took the risk to get online with the prince and express their desire to stay in day 1. This move is extremely dangerous. If the prince is suspicious or narrow-minded, they and their family members who stayed in Daki will surely die without a burial. However, the prince not only agreed to support the weapons, but also returned their family members, which is a tacit consent to them as long as they don't forget Dachi and don't do anything harmful to Dachi. But how did Wokuo treat them? It was the 2 of them who had been in contact with Daki all the time. They were the first to bear the brunt of the alliance. If the prince wanted to settle accounts with someone, he would definitely find them. Even if their family members were no longer in Daki, it would be easy for the prince to kill them. The most important thing is that scholars died for their confidants. They took Wokuo as their confidant, and in the end they knew them, but those who believed in them were princes. How could they not hurt their hearts? Li Jiang is not as soft-hearted as Xueji. How much he trusted and loved Kong Wokuo before, now he hates him so much. A cold light flashed in Li Jiang's eyes, and he said, my lord is already besieging Shijiazhuang. With his ability, I'm afraid he will reach Zhending within half a month. You should find a way to go back to Tokyo and bring our 2 families to Zhending government. Xueji was shocked, what about you? I can't go. If I go, he will be suspicious. Xueji's lips trembled, and Li Jiang grabbed his hand and said, Aji, we have been brothers for 20 years, and we have been together since we were soldiers. For my mother, please help me to fulfill my filial piety. Xueji burst into tears, I knew I shouldn't have brought them here. Who would have thought that the prince didn't want them to threaten us, but was used as a threat by our sworn brothers? You pack up, the reason is ready, the big battle is coming, you go back to gather food and grass. Xueji nodded, wiped away his tears, and waited until the redness and swelling in his eyes had almost disappeared before leaving. After receiving the news, Wokuo took 2 steps in the tent and asked, you said Mr. Xue stayed in the military division's tent for half an hour? What did they say? King Hui Khan, their voices are very low, and their personal soldiers are guarding the gate of the camp. We can't really hear them. Wo Kuo thought for a while, and said, find 2 people to serve Master Shui. Yes. Wo Kuo went to look for Shueji, and asked with a smile, third brother, you are so old, why are you still crying? Shueji smiled embarrassedly, and said, brother, I just talked about the current war with my second brother, and I feel uncomfortable when I think that we will fight Daki soon. Wo Kuo was stunned for a moment, but he didn't expect Shueji to be so direct. Shueji looked at him and said, brother, do we have to fight Daki? Wo Kuo said calmly, why, the third brother is not willing? But aren't you from Dezhou? Dachi has taken over Dezhou's country. Shueji shook his head, and said, Dezhou and Dachi are not much different in my heart, they are both Han people's country anyway, not to mention the emperor of Dezhou is far inferior to the emperor of Dachi. I just think the current emperor of Dachi is good, and our enemy is Dejin, we can destroy Dejin, why should we fight with Dachi? I don't like fighting. Wo Kuo was amused, third brother, I heard you say it's a bit like a grievance between the rivers and lakes. The war is not that simple. Second brother said the same thing, and scolded me. Shueji was depressed. Wo Kuo felt relieved, and said with a smile, second brother, this is for your own good too, by the way, why did you pack your luggage? Shueji lowered his head and said, second brother said that I would be thinking wildly here, so I might as well go back to raise food and grass. I thought I would feel uncomfortable staying here, so I agreed. Wo Kuo thought for a while, nodded and said, it's okay, you don't like fighting, but you are good at raising food and grass. I'll send you back. Shueji did not refuse, but nodded in agreement. The doubts in Wo Kuo's heart disappeared slightly, but he always felt a little uneasy in his heart, and this uneasiness was quickly confirmed. Shueji had only left for a few days, and Qi Heiran took down Shijiazhuang, all the way to Zhending Mansion, and everyone Jin's power was compressed in the central capital area, and Dajin was about to perish. Perhaps because he knew that there was nothing he could do to return to heaven, General Dajin refused to listen to orders, directly rebelled against the country, and made himself king. Many people attacked north and took many cities from him. And the food and grass he had gathered with great difficulty were burned by some force. Wo Kuo was having a headache when he received the news that Shueji disappeared with the old and weak of Shui and Li's family. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1091. Wo Kuo sat quietly on the chair, and after a while he ordered, go and invite the military advisor. King Khan, the military advisor, brought people out of the camp early in the morning, saying that he was going to investigate the terrain. There was a cold light in Wo Kuo's eyes, and he said angrily, tell people to chase them, and they must be chased back. Li Zhang knew all his military arrangements, if he betrayed him, he would suffer heavy losses. King Khan, do we still have to stop the Qi army? Wo Kuo gritted his teeth, and said in a hateful voice, advance to the south, occupy the central capital before the Qi army, and block them to the south of the central capital. Zhongdu is now the capital of Dajin. Wo Kuo's move means that the peace talks with Dajin have broken down and he will destroy Dajin before Daki. The generals under his command rushed to prepare after hearing the words. At this time, Qi Heiran was also rushing to attack the city, and Mu Yangling would sometimes play a guest role as a general and go to the battle. After doing this 2 or 3 times, the defenders would lose 2 generals and would not be able to leave the city. General Shang and General Qin were already immune to Wang Hao's bravery. Seeing Wang Hao coming in solemnly in military uniform, they knew that she had failed to open the city gate. General Qin looked at Qi Heiran, and said, my lord, we have been besieging Zhending for 8 days. I heard that General Mu has gone to Datong Mansion. We must hurry up, or we may fall into General Mu's dangerous place. Chi Heiran was solemn, and ordered, burn the pot and make a meal, everyone will have a good meal tonight. General Qin and General Shang looked at each other, knowing that Chi Heiran was going to attack the city overnight, so he persuaded him, General, the fog is heavy at night, isn't it? Chi Heiran said, the heavy fog is not only for us, don't worry, this king has his own countermeasures. General Qin pulled General Shang, and General Shang said after leaving the tent, why are you pulling me? I want to attack the city. It was also daytime, and the fog was so thick at night that I couldn't even see the road. How can I attack the city? You ask you, where is the son who is always with the general? I don't know where it is. General Shang was taken aback, you mean? My lord always makes a decision before making a move. It was useless for us to ask for a fight before. Why did we agree this time? Just now I thought about it carefully. The prince has not been by the Lord's side for at least 2 days, and I don't know where he is now. General Shang touched his head, the prince is really willing, that is his eldest son, in case something happens on the way. Shut your crow's mouth, my brother is the one who disappeared with the sun. At this time, little Xiong, who was missed by General Qin and others, was leading people to stand on the post and look down. Qin Ming looked down the road and asked, can you really stop people? Try it, if it doesn't work, we will forge documents and sneak into the city wearing Jin Bing's clothes. Qin Ming didn't know where Qi Wenjin came up with so many tricks, so he sat cross-legged on the ground and said, supposedly we shouldn't fight in a fair and honest way, where did you come up with so many tricks? Naturally, little Xiong would not say that he heard the story from his mother. He said, we are also fighting like this. They didn't separate us because they are not capable enough. Here we come. Before Xiao Xiong finished speaking, a soldier came up to him, pointed at the people who were riding a horse from a distance, and said, my lord, look, that group of people is Dakin's messengers, 5 people in each group. Hey, no, why is there an extra person? That man is tied up, he must be a good man. Fart, the one who is tied up is a good person. Okay, Little Bear threw away the weeds in his hand, and said, good people and bad people will find out if they catch them and ask them. Let's go. A group of people slowly slid down the hill and ambushed on both sides of the road. Qin Ming had already prepared the tripping rope. The messenger soldier who was hurrying along didn't pay attention at all. When the tripping rope was raised, the messenger soldier fell off the horse, rolled on the spot with 2 punches, jumped up without looking, and ran in 3 directions. Qi Wenjin secretly praised them for their quick action, and the people flew out like lightning, and grabbed them back one by one with each hand, and they were still on the ground after being knocked out. Qin Ming and other soldiers went to chase the other 2 teams. Qi Wenjin went to pick up the person who fell to the ground. Hey, you mean, why was Jin Bing arrested? The man looked up at Little Bear, and seeing that he was wearing Jin Bing's clothes, he closed his eyes again and ignored him. Qi Wenjin pursed his lips and said, if you don't talk about my young master, I'll cut off your hands and feet and turn them into human sticks. Are you afraid? The man still closed his eyes slightly and did not speak. Just as Qi Wenjin was about to threaten him again, Qin Ming grabbed him back, threw the other 3 people to the ground, and said out of breath, you ran really fast, if it wasn't for us behind, if you ambushed someone, you must have run away, this is not an ordinary messenger. Qi Wenjin went to search them, what important message does it take to use such a powerful messenger? The 3 people who were still awake glared at Qi Wenjin, and shouted angrily in golden language, stop, who are you, how dare you be so rude to the chief, let us go quickly. Qi Wenjin thought it was noisy, so he slapped people unconscious, found a letter box from them, and was about to open it, when the people on the ground said in Chinese, there is something in the letter box, and it will catch fire when you open it. Burn. Qi Wenjin paused, looked at him, looked him up and down and asked, "Are you Han?" The man was non-committal. Qi Wenjin thought for a while, then cut off the rope in his hand with a knife, and handed him the letter box. "You will." "My son," Qin Ming wanted to stop him. Qi Wenjin waved his hand and said, "It's okay, he can't escape." The man looked up at Qi Wenjin carefully, then lowered his eyes, took off his clothes, put the letter box in a dark place, wet his hands with water, slowly opened the letter box in a clever way, and quickly put the letter paper, pull it out from the letter box, and unfold it directly in the dark under the clothes for Qi Wenjin to see. Qi Wenjin's face changed when he saw the contents of the letter. He took out the letter paper and put it under the sun, and the letter paper immediately caught fire. Qi Wenjin saw that all the letters were burned, and then he looked at Qin Ming and said, "Send the signal, we must take down Zhending tonight, I have something important to report to my father." Qi Wenjin pointed to the 6 people on the ground and said, "Separate them and lock them up, and we'll talk about it after we get Zhending." Qin Ming couldn't help asking privately, "What happened?" Dajin ceded the city to Zixia, and formed an alliance with Zixia, and asked Zixia to send troops to aid him. "In a few days, Zixia will send troops. My grandfather bears the brunt of the West Road, and most of the troops from Dajin province need to reinforce Zhending, so we have to attack the city quickly, otherwise the city will be even more difficult to attack when Dakin's reinforcements arrive." It was night. Qi Wenjin and others pretended to be messengers and knocked on the gate of Zhending, sent forged letters, so as to sneak into the camp, and set fires everywhere late at night, causing chaos in Zhending city. Qi soldiers took advantage of this opportunity to attack the city and captured Zhending mansion at sunrise. At this point, the front of Daki's northward advance was pushed to the Zhending Hejian area, and most of the lost land occupied by Dajin was recovered, leaving only the Zongdudaetong area not recovered. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1092. "Father," little Xiang rushed over and shouted, "Father, that Wang 11 who helped me take out the secret letter wants to see you." Qi Heiran had just learned about the cooperation between Dajin and Zixia from Xiao Xiang, so he naturally knew what happened. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Let him come." Wang 11 was quickly brought up. When he saw Qi Heiran, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed, "My lord, I'm a messenger soldier from the 6th North Office. He has been in charge of summoning Li Zhang." Qi Heiran looked serious, and asked, "Then you should be in Dating Mansion, why are you here?" Li Zhang sent a message to Bazi, asking Bazi to bring back some secret files immediately, and then I never saw the message again. Not long ago, colleagues from the 6th Institute in Tokyo received Shueji's distress message. What about the secret file? The original copy was hidden in Dating Mansion by the humble official. Wang 11 raised his head and said, "The copy is in the humble official's mind." The 6th Office of the North was the spies that Qi Ziyuan had inserted into the Northland back then. After the founding of the Great Qi, the 6th Office of the North was established. These spies were centralized and managed, and it was regarded as a spy agency of the Northland. People like Wang 11 who have been trained and have special abilities are especially entrusted with important tasks. Obviously, Wang 11's special ability is memory. Qi Heiran didn't ask any more questions, and immediately asked someone to prepare a pen and paper for him. After asking about the last communication with Li Zhang, he left and asked people to surround the camp. Little Xiang scratched his head anxiously, and couldn't help asking, "Father, isn't Li Zhang the military advisor of Wokuo? How could he have contact with the people from the 6th North Institute?" "He is from the 6th Institute of the North," Qi Heiran said flatly. Little Xiang opened his mouth wide, and said in admiration, "Father, you are so good, even a spy can do this." Qi Heiran sneered, 8 years ago, Wokuo was just a slave in the mine. What's so difficult about being his side? Although Li Zhang had quit, he was still loyal to Daki. Now that he disappeared, I don't know if he escaped or was arrested. Bear also frowned. Mu Yangling said, didn't Wang 11 say that Xueji took his family away? Xueji asked for help from the North 6th Institute. It must be in danger. Why don't you ask someone to find a way to rescue his family? No matter what. To save the lives of his mother, wife, and children, in order to live up to his painstaking efforts. Qi Heiran nodded, since he has not failed De Qi will naturally not fail him. Last time, he was the one who reported the news of Wo Kuo's betrayal of the alliance, and this time he took the risk of letting Wang 11 deliver the news, which shows his affection for De Qi. Father, Dajin's reinforcements are coming soon, why don't you let me lead an army to resist the enemy? Little Xiong eagerly said. Qi Heiran shook his head and said, we can't fight Xixia. They dared to start a full-scale war. Naturally, they had already prepared for and countermeasures against Xixia. Yuan Zhao still led an army of 100,000 on the border of Xixia, and there was a rebellion in Xixia itself. He didn't think Xixia could send much troops to stop Mu Shi. What's more, he now has an army of 150,000 in his hands, and behind him there are 50,000 elite soldiers led by Qi Ziyuan. Together, they are enough to crush them. Qi Heiran rejected his son's proposal, and decided to move forward in a steady manner. When the news came that General Yuan had captured the Hejian mansion, he would move forward. The decline of Dajin has become obvious, and Wu Lai has the intention to save it, but he is powerless. 20 days after the fall of Zhending Mansion, Datong Mansion fell. On the north side, Wo Kuo played the banner of Dayuan, which also blocked the way out of Zhongdu to the north. Zhongdu was surrounded by Daqi and Dayuan. The two countries are not allies but seem to be allies. Lose big gold and occupy Zhongdu. Wuli's subordinates tried to persuade him to avoid the central capital so as to keep Qingshan, but Wuli refused one by one, saying, Dajin's vast grassland was completely divided by Dayuan and Xixia, and the south was occupied by Daqi. Where can I escape to? Why don't you die for your country? Your descendants are dishonest, and you have failed your ancestors' expectations, so you should go underground to plead guilty to your ancestors. Wu Lai smiled bitterly, however, Daqi and Dayuan should not think about it too well. I am dead and Dajin is destroyed. They will be the next to fight. As for the treacherous Xixia, they will not exist for too long, just like our Dajin long time. Wu Lai looked at the ministers and generals of His Highness, and the hatred and suspicion towards them dissipated one by one in his heart, and he sighed, you guys go, run away as far as you can, I'll wait here to see who breaks in. Come to the city. At this time, Mu Yangling was riding a horse looking up at the majestic Zhongdu city, feeling complicated in his heart. This was the Beijing city in his previous life, and it was also the capital of Dajin in this life. Qi Ziyuan also looked up at the capital city, and said in admiration, although Jiangnan is prosperous, but in terms of majesty, it must belong to the north. Living in Jiangnan for a long time, I am afraid that the bones will be crisp. Fan Zijin's heart moved, and he asked, the emperor wants to move the capital back to Chang'an. Qi Heiran said happily, Chang'an is also good, it's not far from Xingzhou Mansion, and we are familiar with it. Fan Zijin rolled his eyes and said, it's convenient for your daughter-in-law to go back to her mother's house, isn't it? Qi Ziyuan watched them quarreling, and the worries just now dissipated, and he said amusedly, okay, if the quarrel continues, it will be a joke. Turning around and seeing the complicated flashing in Mu Yangling's eyes, he asked, why, Aling has opinions on all of this. Mu Yangling lowered his eyes, thought for a while and said, Your Majesty, if you want to move the capital, then move the capital here. Qi Heiran was dumbfounded, and said, what nonsense are you talking about? The city wall of the central capital looks high, but in terms of prosperity, none of the 10 can compare to Linan Prefecture. Mu Yangling said indifferently, if the capital is located here, it will naturally become prosperous. We don't have to think about whether it is prosperous or not. Then it's better to set it in Chang'an. There is a natural gate there, and one man guards the gate and 10,000 men cannot open it. Most of the land there has been reclaimed. Although the land is sparsely populated due to the Jin people going south, as long as they settle down, there will definitely be a lot of people in a short period of time, and most of them are old families from the past. The capital is set there. There is no room for development, Mu Yangling said, but here is different. The central capital is not developed enough. The land is fertile and vast. The imperial city can be well planned. Besides, it is close to the outside of the Great Wall. It is actually the gate of the country. It has always been from the north. The forces of the south attack will pass through here. Isn't that putting the capital under the noses of others? Fan Zijin said dissatisfiedly. As soon as they hit the capital, they hit the capital. Qi Ziyuan said thoughtfully, the emperor guards the gate of the country. If there is such a crisis, the emperor should encourage diligence and live in Chang'an during the Great Zhou dynasty. There is Hang Pass blocking the way. It is unavoidable to be happy, but in the end it is also destroyed by Hang Pass. Hang Pass once broken, the Great Zhou court can only flee south.